Hey, if you're a sports fan, you are going to absolutely love our podcast today. And even if you're not a sports fan, there are so many life principles that you're going to hear. Our guest today, Lee Melchionni, played basketball for Duke University in the early 2000s. He was a player agent and now a lawyer. If you're a sports fan, and even if you're not, you're going to love this. Join us now. Lee Melchionni, thank you so much for being on the No Gray Areas podcast. I am so excited about this interview, partly because I've been a basketball fan. I played basketball, not at your level, as our audience is going to hear, but always been a basketball fan. And when you and I talked about a month ago on the phone, Lee, I admitted to you that if someone asked me who I cheered for in college basketball, I said anyone playing Duke. And that was, and Lee, by the way, for our audience, he played at Duke in the early 2000s. Is that correct, Lee?
Correct.
Yeah. But I told you on the phone that as I get older, I realize that some of the teams, coaches, players that I used to cheer against, you just can't help having a tremendous amount of respect for them. So Krzyzewski, Coach K, as you guys probably referred to him, he's one of those. And I cheered against Duke mainly because I had a childhood friend that was an annoying Duke fan. So I have great respect. So let's back up a little bit. We're going to talk about all kinds of interesting things today, but I want to back up a little bit and get your background. So where did you grow up, Lee?
Sure. I grew up right outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, in I guess what we consider a small town, Lancaster, which is associated with Amish people.
Yeah.
I guess would be, when you say that to the general public, that's where Amish people are, right?
Yeah. So did you grow up around the Amish? Like that was something you typically saw? You're driving down the road and
not
horse and buggy,
right? Once in a blue moon, a horse and buggy would go down the street I lived on, but you would more see them. There's a great, famous, long-standing market that runs downtown Lancaster, and then obviously when you go out in the country. The farms and a lot of the food that you eat locally from Lancaster is from Amish farms. But, they're also incredibly simple and some of the most hardest working people you ever meet, right? Like they get up, sunrises, go to bed when the sun sets. They don't have electricity. And so I also, growing up, I found it, it's an odd lifestyle, but had a tremendous amount of respect for the way they live.
Yeah, I imagine. So just really quick, are you a Philly fan then? Philadelphia Eagles?
So it might be surprising. I love the Philadelphia Eagles. Love them. I really like the Philadelphia Phillies, and then the other Philadelphia sports teams. I don't, kind of indifferent.
You didn't even name them. You didn't
right,
even name
that's
them.
odd. I love obviously root for the Sixers. The Flyers, but kind of grew up in the age where I was more of a fan of players than NBA teams, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So were you focused on basketball growing up, or did you play multiple sports and basketball is kind of where you landed in your high school years? And
yeah, so grew up playing pretty much everything. We loved growing up playing baseball, soccer, and basketball. Never played tackle football. We didn't have lacrosse in Lancaster when I grew up. But I played soccer through my sophomore year of high school and actually thought I was going to play soccer in high school at one point. But I had a very good summer circuit from an AAU standpoint, and then at this Adidas ABCD camp where I got a significant number of scholarship offers after my sophomore year, and at that point just made the decision to focus on basketball.
Yeah. So why Duke? Why'd you pick that? Because you said a number of offers.
Sure. So I took the proverbial blue pill from a very young age. So my father played basketball at Duke. My sister, at that time, she was 2 years ahead of me, was a sophomore at Duke when I was being recruited. And so, Pat, from the time I can remember, unlike you, I loved Duke growing up, and it was a dream of mine to go play there. So, basically I said, if Duke recruited me at all, I was going to go there. And that's, fulfilled a dream of mine, attending there and playing basketball.
I almost want to apologize for not, again, it was because I'm going to give a shout out right now. It was my childhood friend named Jason. He was an annoying Duke fan. But when I look back, I go, I wish I could go back and just soak up the respect and awe of a coach that did what Coach K did.
You don't need to apologize, right? I think in our life, there are teams that are polarizing. And why are they polarizing? Because they win, right? No one cares. No one has an opinion about the teams that lose all the time, right? But
absolutely,
the Yankees, the Dallas Cowboys, the Pittsburgh Steelers,
Yep.
Duke. You go
Yep.
on and on. Pick your sport. Previous years, UCLA, USC, Texas football. You either hate them or you love them. There's
So
no in
true.
between.
Yeah.
And I would always have, you always got to have something smart to say where it's, oh, man, I hate Duke. Like, I could see you'd be upset if you couldn't get into the school. That would upset me too.
Yeah.
So, which usually further enrages people. Like,
oh, that's good. Yeah, that's good. That's good. So, tell me your best moment and your worst moment in those years that you played for Coach K.
Sure. So being at Duke, I remember it's a funny story, not funny story. My freshman year, we're in practice before the season starts, and it's a coaches clinic. So coaches come from all over the country, like high school, mainly high school coaches, to hear Coach K conduct practice over the course of the weekend. So we would do, like, whether it's Friday, Saturday, we do 2 days and then have another practice on Sunday. So he has a microphone on that's obviously everyone in Cameron can hear what he's saying. He's mic'd up. We're doing a drill where I'm on the perimeter. We're feeding the post. So no one is guarding me, but there's a post defender. And I remember I throw a post pass and the defender intercepted. He's like, Lee, what the heck are you doing, son? Like, how are you going to turn the ball over with no defense? You're the worst player I recruited in 5 years, son. And you're 18, 19 years old. And I just remember.
And he's mic'd up?
Yeah, all these coaches can hear this. He's mic'd up. And I just slinked to the back of the line, Pat, just wishing I could be invisible.
Yeah.
And there's lots of, now with my teammates, you joke about these things that you went through together and that bond you. But that's one you're like, oh man, that was rough.
Isn't that true though, what you're saying? And that's where the camaraderie in sports or for first responders or military, you're in the trenches together in a sense, and there's a bonding that takes place, right? Like you went through this crap together.
Couldn't agree more. And you never want to compare sports to things you just said, right? Like war or first responders or actual matters of life and death. But when you go through incredibly stressful situations where you're pushing yourself to mentally and physically to limits that you're probably not capable of unless someone else is pushing you there.
Yeah.
You create a lifelong bond with someone that, whether if I haven't talked to a teammate in 6 months, a year, when I see them or talk to them, it's like we spoke yesterday because of what you went through. And that's, to your point, it's a bond we'll always have.
Yeah, for sure. What about a highlight? What was one of your high moments, your favorite moments from those years you played for Coach K?
I mean, you're a part of so many great moments and victories. I would say, even we went to 3 Sweet 16s and 1 Final Four. My sophomore year, I think we were deserving of winning the national championship. We went to the Final Four and lost to UConn, unfortunately, in the semifinals, who went on to win a national title. But I think, that experience as a collegiate basketball player, we won actually in Atlanta, where I live now, in the Georgia Dome, beat Xavier to go on to the Final Four. I think that, and I really didn't play that much, it was really at all, but it's an incredible memory to be a part of something like that.
I can't. I mean, for all of us, when you say you didn't play much, again, someone like me didn't make it to the level that you did. I still just would love to feel that vibe when you walk out on the floor at a Final Four game. That's got to be something you'll never forget.
Yeah, at that time, I don't even know if it still exists, was at the Alamo Dome in San Antonio. And, there's 60, 70,000 people there to watch a basketball game. And, this was my sophomore year. And honestly, I used that as motivation to go into my junior year to make sure I was on the court. So, but it was to experience something like that where the number of teams that play basketball, in the NCAA to come down to you're one of the Final Four, something you'll always remember.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Well, I read an article that was written about you about a year ago or something, and you mentioned in there 4 things that you really took away from your time at Duke with the Blue Devils, Coach K. You talked about attention to detail, work ethic, teamwork, and relentless positivity. Speak into those a little bit. Like, how has that helped set you up for life? Like, some people would look at it and go, you played basketball for 4 years. Yeah. But I think others of us would go, no, there's a lot more that happened in those 4 years.
Yeah, when you go through something like that, your college experience is obviously different, right? You have school, and then you have basketball, which is basically a full-time job, but something I still play to this day for free. And when you talk about attention to detail, it's, oh, okay, we beat a team by 15. You think that that's great. We kicked their ass, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But you watch tape and you look at, minute details of an angle you had on a screen or a defensive rotation that you missed, things that you could have done better, um, where you're constantly trying to improve. You're not satisfied. And I think, if you take that level of detail and accountability into your job, into being a father, whatever it is, it's a lifelong lesson for you. Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And work ethic, right?
Right. I think similar to you, Pat, you growing up, you watch Duke and you think, all they do is win. Right. And I came to Duke. I was a top 100 rated high school player. And I thought, hey, I'm going to go to Duke. I'm going to play right there. You see, they win every game. And I think after arriving there, you realize the amount of work that goes into like the unseen hours, right? The time in the gym, conditioning, whether it's, running sprints on the court, on the track, getting stronger with your body, and then your time in the gym, just working on your game and
Yeah.
playing.
Yeah.
And those things, I think, I'm sure we'll talk more about it, but I think you find in life, the harder you work, the more luck or success you have. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, at the end of this podcast, I'm going to read a couple of statements and I want you to give some feedback on, but I'm pretty sure one of them, based on what you just said, you're going to disagree. It is a statement that our audience, myself, you probably hear often in our culture. But you also mentioned teamwork.
Yeah.
That was obviously something that you were required to have in those 4 years there, but how has that helped you in life? Like, where did you
Yeah.
learn that that's implemented in your life as a father, like you said, in your workforce?
Yeah. I think being a part, whether you're working at a company or you're doing something on your own, saying on your own, you're never doing it alone. I think you
Yeah.
find that you need people around you. We all have strengths, we all have weaknesses, and you need people to help you in your areas of weakness. And I think the big thing at Duke was being a part of something bigger than yourself.
Yeah.
So checking your ego at the door, right?
Yeah.
If you're telling me that to help Duke win the game, I need to sit on the bench and cheer hard, I'll do that, right? It's very hard. You want to get out there and play. That's analogous to at a job. If you're telling me for us to be successful with this company, I need to clean the toilets, then that's what I'll do. You can call me the head toilet bowl cleaner. And I think, just checking your ego at the door and realizing, in the grand scheme of things in life, and this may sound harsh, but like how unimportant you are, right?
Yes.
You want to be a
Yes.
part of something bigger than yourself and, reminding yourself that you have to do whatever it takes to achieve the goal of the team, not your individual goal.
Man, Lee, I love that you're bringing that point up because I remember one of the lowest points in my life. I won't go into what happened, but I remember I took a long drive out in the desert and I got on my car and it was a clear night. And if you've ever been in the desert or our audience ever been in the desert, there's a lot of stars up there when you're out of the city lights. And I looked up and I realized how small I was in the expanse of the universe. And then I started thinking historically, who's Pat McCullough in the expanse of human history? It's almost like a dichotomy where we have to believe both, that there's something special about us, but there's not.
I couldn't agree more with you, Pat. You have to have a sense of self, a sense of ego, right, to accomplish anything. You don't want to be a wallflower but I agree with you. When you take a look up at the stars at night or look at how old our planet is, and if we live for 100 years, you think that's a long time. You realize how insignificant you are. It's such a dichotomy, like you said, but it's, sometimes you need those reminders that like, hey man, one foot in front of the other, keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, for sure. And we live in a culture, I think, that loves the stars, as I think humanity has always done that. But our culture, I think, especially, we always like to point out if there's a company that's doing well, we're gonna give one man or one woman the credit. If there's a team doing well, we like to point out to one man, one woman, and it always would go back to team, doesn't it? Like you're not going to see anything great that's ever been done. And yes, there was a leader. Maybe there was the star player or whatever, but there's going to be a team involved. And it sounds like that's one of the things that Coach K really tried to push on you guys.
Yeah. You talk about people that we, other than royalty, right? Who are the British monarchy, you're born into it. Everyone has a story behind someone that inspired them as a child, a teacher, a coach, a parent, an aunt, an uncle. And then, as they rise through the ranks, someone, a mentor, right? You
Yeah.
never go it alone, or a strong team surrounding them. And I think
Yeah.
you make a great point there, Pat. I couldn't agree more.
Well, the fourth one that you mentioned in this article, I loved, and I'd love for you to dig in a little bit. Relentless positivity. What
Yeah.
did you mean by that? Is that something you learned from your time there, or is that something you actually saw in the coaching staff?
Yeah, I think I've always been, my natural disposition is to be positive, right? And I think that whining, complaining, I just cannot stand it to me, because it's
Yep.
just a waste of energy, oxygen, all that.
Yeah.
And so I think, for relentless positivity, it's normal. We're all going to get down. You're going to have negative thoughts. You're going to have your mind wander. You're going to have stresses. You're going to have anxieties. But I think when you kind of take a step back, and I always remind myself, how blessed I am, right? I'm
Yeah.
healthy. The people I love, my family and around me are healthy and happy. And
Yeah.
that's what really matters at the end of the day. And you're going to have situations in life that are difficult, but I've always found that I've grown and learned the most from situations where you're difficult, you lose, you get your ass kicked, versus winning.
Yeah.
I think that holds true.
Don't you think that's one of the things that sports, and it doesn't, you don't have to get to your level and be Division One, junior high, high school, if you did play college, professionals. But one of the things that sports teaches us is exactly what you're saying, or it can teach us if we choose to learn that lesson. Is you lose on Friday and you go home and you can't sleep because you're thinking of all the things you did wrong. But then you got to get up the next day and you got another game, right? And you learn how you have to flip that switch.
Exactly. So it's whether it's another game, Pat, to move on, or it's preparation for the next game, in terms of, what, that guy forced me left all day. I couldn't go left, or he was faster, stronger. I need to figure out a way to improve or work on my game or my skills, my technical ability. And I couldn't agree more with you in that, if you're winning all the time, you think you're doing great. It's when you lose is when you go back to the drawing board and need to
Yeah.
to strengthen areas of weakness.
So when you had, I'm assuming not just in your days playing, but even when we move outside of that, you went on to be a player agent, and now you actually lead a firm in Atlanta called Justice Partners. In your personal life, you've had some low moments. How in your lowest moments, how do you choose, or what are some things that you do to choose to have that relentless positivity? Because it's, when you're down, you're down. It's not that
Yeah,
you can just go like, man, this feels crappy right now, and
yeah,
so what are things that you found in your life that works for you in those low moments to move toward that relentless positivity?
sure. So I've always found that being outside in nature, it helped me clear my head. You talked about driving in the desert, but I love to work out. I love to get a sweat in. And so whether it's outside, whether it's playing hoops, it's a workout, going for a walk, whatever it is, I think helps you to ground yourself, clear your head a bit. And then, as I said before, just one foot in front of the other, realizing that, yeah, tough times, it's not always going to be so tough, and great times aren't always going to last, right? One day at a time, one foot in front of the other, and dealing with the issues at hand to come to a resolution.
Yeah, yeah. Man, I love what you just said, because the older I get, I don't know that I really understood this in my 20s so much, but the older I get, and I'm way past my 20s, uh, I really resonate with what you just said, where now when I'm in a time where I'm kind of on that mountaintop experience, it's not a depressing thought, but I just tell myself,
Yeah,
if I live long enough, there's going to be another valley, and that's okay. That's part of life, right?
it's part of life. And I agree with you that, life is not all puppy dogs and ice cream.
Hmm.
And to your point, it, everything is fleeting. Great
Yeah,
times don't last forever, and bad times don't either.
that's right.
And I say you enjoy both, but hopefully you have a lot more good times than bad.
Yeah. Well, so you leave Duke, you went over and you played for a year, right? In
Yes.
Europe. Yep,
Yeah.
professional Europe, and then you became a player coach. How long did you, or a player agent? How long did you do that?
Sure. So I was an agent for about 7 years. So it's when I stopped playing in Italy, moved to LA, and worked for a mentor and one of the guys who really started the agent industry out there.
Yeah, yeah. You played in Italy. Did you like Italy?
Italy was an amazing experience, but like all things, Pat, youth is wasted on the young, right? To experience a culture, the country, food, language, the people, was an amazing experience, right? And being
Yeah,
able to kind of travel to different
yeah,
areas around Europe. But at the same time, all I wanted to do was come home and be with my friends. So, hindsight's 2020, where I was getting paid uh, good money to play a game that I now play for free. And so, would I've liked to have played for 5, 6, 7 years? Sure, but I have no regrets. Right?
Yeah.
Came back and started my career, and I'm still grateful for the experience that I had. There was an incredible experience.
Yeah. Well, I hear what you're saying is that if you could go back and relive that, you would soak up knowing that, hey, I'm not going to be forever. I got this year or 2 years, and I'm going to really soak up the culture and the.
Correct. I think, having the opportunity to play basketball would afford me time off in the summers, right? And when you start your career, you realize, like, yeah, you don't get 3 months off in the summer. So looking back then, when you say to yourself, "Oh, I'm in a hurry to start my professional career," in terms of ending my athletic career, the me now would tell myself then, like, "Hey, man, that's not going anywhere. Why don't you take 3 years, travel around Europe, experience this in your downtime, because when you do start working, you don't have the time to do that. So
Yes.
start a family.
Yeah.
But that's life, right, Pat? So.
It is. These are life lessons that you learn, which I think is part of the. So for you younger people listening to this podcast, that's part of the wisdom of youth, is to listen to us that are maybe a little further along and pay attention to what we're saying. Because I have the same experience with you, different, but my wife and I, right after we got married, we moved to Chicago, and all I did for 4 years was talk about how I wanted to get back to where we were from, which was beautiful Western Montana.
Right.
Once we got back, we've always looked at those 4 years and said, we missed so many opportunities. We were in one of the most amazing cities in the world, and all we were longing for is to get back to where we were from. And we vowed that we would never miss those opportunities again.
Right.
Yep. And it sounds a little bit like that was your experience in Italy, where you missed some things.
I think, to just appreciate, be present in the moment. And not that I wasn't present. I have incredible memories and friends I still stay in touch with from that time. But, man, when the season ended, I couldn't wait to get on the plane back to the States.
Yep. So what are you doing now? So you lead a firm in Atlanta called Justice Partners. What exactly is that?
Yeah, so basically, to put it in a nutshell, I'm an attorney, but I don't necessarily, not in court, not taking depositions, not participating in litigations. I leverage my law license to participate in different business transactions.
Yeah.
Essentially, and that Justice Partners is a fund model that we've used to participate in different litigations, and then it's kind of expanded from there.
Yeah. Okay. So now, understanding some of this background, I'm going to give you 4 statements, and I would just love your feedback. And these are statements, again, for our audience. These are things you've probably heard said. I think in our culture, we hear these things often. You may agree with some of these. You may disagree with some of these. So tell me whether you agree or disagree, and why or why not. First statement, we'll often hear, he or she was an overnight success.
I could not disagree more. Right. And I'm sure you've seen the quotes where you have the person who grinds and toils away in silence or in the shadows, and then all of a sudden they have their success, or their company hits, or whatever it is, and everyone knows them, and they think that, oh wow, this just happened overnight to them.
Yeah.
But no one understands the probably years and thousands of hours that went into not even the culminating moment there, but just the reaching that point where people know them, or the success, however you define it. So I disagree with that statement strongly.
I figured you would, because of some of the articles that I've read about you and some of the things that you said over the years. I figured you would, and I'm with you. I completely disagree with that. And again, I don't know why we live in a culture, not everyone, but so often we try to twist or turn things into it being or appearing to be as overnight success. And I think you're right. If you look and you dig into it, you'll always find a story of someone who was relentlessly pursuing this goal and went through a lot of hard work in the shadows, as you said.
Correct.
Yep.
Correct. Yeah, I agree.
What about this one? Do you agree or disagree? Why or why not? We have little to no control over our future or our destiny.
So back to kind of our point about how small we are in this universe, on Earth and in time. And I don't know if you and your wife had children, but my wife and I have children, and I think
I have 6 grandchildren.
Yeah, congratulations, amazing. So I think sometimes in your head, thoughts can creep in about, and as you get older, you hear about uh, friends or parents of friends growing up who have medical issues or things happen. I think that's kind of, you question your own mortality, and so things that are out of your control. But as far as your future and your destiny and things that you can put yourself in a position of your life to be successful, whatever it is your passion is, through work, through what you do after work. I believe that you control your own destiny
Yeah.
in that path.
I almost hear you saying there's a little bit of both, though, right?
I do.
That you
I
do
think
control
that
your destiny, but you're saying there are some things that just happen that we can't control, right? So,
there are. I think we can all look back at chance meetings where you went to something, you talked to someone, and then that led to you, whether it be a job or going somewhere, doing something, or meeting your wife. And so I think there is some chance in the universe.
yeah.
But as far as when you talk about, I'm sure you've heard the quote, "Luck is when hard work meets preparation," and it's
Yes, I love that.
right. And I think that we talk. There's always going to be crazy stuff that happens you can't control. But I think I think, let's be honest here. People listening to this podcast and you, Pat, we don't know any super lazy people who we would define as successful, right?
Absolutely.
Whether it's with the family or at their job. So I think you get out what you put in, and then you deserve what you get out.
Well put, Lee. I can't go back in all the decades I've lived and think of anybody who I've met who's successful in whatever field they're in that's lazy and just
Right,
sitting back and waiting for that opportunity to show up.
right.
Yep. All right. How about this next one? You agree, disagree, why or why not? You get what you work for, not what you wish for.
I couldn't agree more. I think we all, you wish to win the lottery or something like that. But and I've always found that anything worth having, or difficult, is those are the things that I find the most joy in.
Yeah.
It's the journey.
Yeah.
It's not the
Yeah.
destination.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've had accomplishments in your life where it's the chase. You're going after this goal, and then once you actually achieve it, not that it has an emptiness or a hollowness to it, but to me, I love the journey, right? The
Yep.
chase, the pursuit of it. And then yes, I think I said it earlier, the work you put in is what you get out of that is what you deserve.
Yeah, and I think that's it's so easy to sometimes you have your bucket list items or your items that you hope for or wish for. But I love sometimes being around those people that they love to dream with you, but then will say, so what are you doing to get there?
Right.
Right? Yeah.
Right.
Those are yeah.
It's back to I was thinking about people complain or why. Okay, you can't stand your job, or you're out of shape, or this hurts or something. Well, what are you doing to change it?
Yeah.
And if you're making those changes or life changes, then by all means, please, I will help you. This it. But just to your point, you can dream, but what are you doing to make it a reality?
Well, and that's so well said, and it fits so perfectly with kind of the whole idea of our podcast, where we talk about the power and complexity of human choice and the power of choice. Like, we as human beings have been given the power to make a choice, and especially those of us that were born in an area where we have a lot of privileges, right? We live in a first world country, not necessarily just trying to figure out where we're going to get our next meal. There's a lot of choices that we can make, and unfortunately, sometimes what we fall into is this idea of, well, it's just whatever happens to me. I can't really control it. And I hear you saying clearly from the way you've lived your life and what you're saying, you would completely disagree with that. You say there's tremendous amount of power that you have.
Right. But you also want to recognize your privilege too, right? Being born in
Yep.
America to a
Yep.
two-parent household, you're better than 99% of this world, right?
Absolutely.
And then the I am so grateful and blessed for the opportunities that I've had in my life. I know that others haven't, but I also know, Pat, that I've taken advantage of them, and I've worked my ass off
Yep.
to achieve as well.
That's a perfect balance, because you are grateful. You do look at the privileges that you got. Again, I would say the same thing. I grew up in I wouldn't even say I was middle class, but I look back and I think of like the work ethic and the character that was instilled in me from the coaches and the teachers. And
Yeah.
I had opportunities presented to me that are probably putting me ahead of 90% of the world. So understand that. But then the question becomes, what are you going to do with those?
Right. And how
Right.
many people do we know, like we just said, that are lazy or haven't taken advantage of that?
Yeah, for sure. Well, last one here. Agree, disagree, why or why not? The successful person is the average person focused.
I think that is focused may be too simple, but I think that an average person who is focused, disciplined, relentless in their pursuit, absolutely can become extraordinary in whatever their pursuit or goals are. So I think that is definitely one of those things, an attribute that you need to achieve at a high level.
Well, Lee, man, I've really enjoyed our time today. We're going to finish with 2 truths and a lie, which is ironic. We're on No Gray Areas. I'm going to ask you to lie to me, but it fits. It's a way for our audience to get to know you a little bit better, and I'm going to try to pick out your lie. But let me just say, I really, really hope, and I'm going to work toward making this hope a reality, that someday I'll be sitting with you at a Duke game.
Oh, you can make that happen, Pat.
Oh, I would love that.
Happen. Not a problem. I know someone who can make that happen. That's not a problem.
That would be a dream come true, because I just love the sport of basketball, and to be in that arena, it's got to be amazing. Do you still go to the games fairly often?
I do. It's my 2 boys, so they're coming of age. They're younger, so they're into it now, and so to share that with them, life is coming full circle. It's good for business to take people back, and then Pat, whenever I step back on campus, it still kind of gives me goosebumps. It takes me back to when I was that time, and I'm almost 40. I still feel young in my mind. Like, I still remember moving into summer school there, and I'm sure you have the same thing with certain hallmark or benchmark memories in your mind. So it's crazy.
Oh, I love it. Okay, 2 truths and a lie. See if you can stump me.
So the game, I was at the Duke game where Christian Laettner hit the shot to beat Kentucky in 1992. Okay. I also hold the record for the NBA Summer League for most charges taken in a single game, with 4. And also, my uncle, Bill Melchionni, his number is retired for Villanova basketball and what is now Brooklyn Nets.
Ooh, those are good ones. The number one, when you said the first one, I saw that play in my head. I don't know how many times I watched it, right?
Right. It's probably, top 5, top 10, U.S. sports moment.
Yep.
Basketball moment.
Yep. That's the 3/4 court pass, right? He's at
correct. He catches it at the foul line.
Catches it back to the.
Yep. Grant Hill threw it. Of course, I love Duke growing up, so I could probably recite the play call. So
yeah. Okay, I was just doing my math really quick to make sure you were old enough to even be at that game. I'm going to say that's true just because I want that to be true. Is that true? You were there? You were there. No wonder you went to Duke. You didn't have a chance.
I still remember my dad lifting me up. So, yeah, it's awesome. I was there. It's incredible.
Okay. All right. So that's true. And then I'm going to go with the charge. That's the lie.
You're right.
Okay, good. Because the only reason I know that is I knew that your uncle had played for Villanova. And so I was guessing the rest of it was true. But is there part of that that's true, though, the lie? Was there a little bit of that?
No, I tried to go on with I didn't actually even play NBA Summer League. I figured, being a Duke guy, depending on how deep your research was, you might be like, you know what, I could see that being true. He was a hustle guy. So
Yep. That you would step in and
take to make you think.
Yeah. You did. Well, hey, Lee, thank you so much. Hope to meet you in person someday. Really, really appreciate you taking the time, and the lessons I think that you talked about are life lessons we all need to apply. So appreciate you, my friend.
This was great, Pat. Thank you so much. Really enjoyed it.
Lee and I spoke about a lot of life principles, and I would encourage you to choose just one of those and focus on those for the next week. For me, I'm going to take away living in the moment. For this next week, I'm going to really focus on living in the moment. Make sure that you share with us your thoughts. You can comment below, or you can email us at info@nograyareas.com. Remember to like, follow, and subscribe.